Okay, the next item of business is a statement by Neil Gray on NHS Grampian. The Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of his statement. Therefore, there should be no interventions or interruptions. I invite Neil Gray, Cabinet Secretary, up to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I wish to update Parliament on our decision to move NHS Grampian to level 4 on the escalation framework. Presiding Officer, I want to begin by once again acknowledging that staff in NHS Grampian continue to work tirelessly to deliver the high-quality healthcare that we expect. Our intervention is in no way a reflection on the excellent care and support that they offer local people each and every day, nor should we forget the significant health service innovations and improvements that I have seen first-hand during visits to Grampian. Indeed, the purpose of this intervention is to enable local staff to go further. We will do so by providing the right balance of scrutiny and support to stabilise the system, ensuring a robust basis for the wider local transformation required over the longer term. And we are determined to do this in a way that is not detrimental to key frontline services. NHS Grampian has been experiencing significant financial and operational pressures for several months. This prompted the Health Board's escalation to Stage 3 of the NHS Scotland Support and Intervention Framework for Financial Management in January of this year. Stage 3 is the first formal stage of escalation, and as such, NHS Grampian has been receiving a package of tailored support. However, there remain significant concerns about the Board's financial position, plans, leadership and governance, and any associated impact this may have on the delivery of local services. Indeed, we heard a number of these concerns during the members' debate on NHS Grampian, led by Mr Lumsden on the 22nd of April. At that time, I assured the Chamber that I would keep the Board's escalation position under close review and, if required, that I would not hesitate to act further in the best interests of local people. Following careful consideration, the Government announced on the 12th of May that NHS Grampian's escalation status had been raised to Stage 4 of the framework for finance, leadership and governance. NHS Grampian had the largest financial deficit of any health board in 2024-25, reporting a forecast outturn deficit of £65.1 million. Indeed, despite record funding of over £1.34 billion in the current financial year and the tailored support already offered under Stage 3 of the framework, the Board will be in receipt of cumulative brokerage from the Government in excess of £90 million across the last 2 years. Concerns remain about the future financial pressures for NHS Grampian, with insufficient confidence that the Board's current plans will both arrest the rate of expenditure and deliver the sustainable recovery that is required. That is a position that we cannot tolerate. It is our judgment that further formal escalation is therefore necessary. Along with the additional support and scrutiny this will provide, we must also seek to mitigate the significant financial risks to both the local board and wider overall NHS. Alongside financial management, NHS Grampian are being escalated due to rising concerns about local services. This includes the operational pressures that led the Board to declare a critical incident for 3 days last November, diverting some activity to other areas due to capacity constraints. The Board has also since referred to a number of ongoing intolerable risks, including NHS Grampian's ability to effectively respond to persistent demand and pressures on local unscheduled and planned care. Both the Government and the Centre for Sustainable Delivery have been engaging and supporting the Board for some time to help assess delivery and target sustained improvements in local unscheduled care performance. Indeed, I want to be clear that this is an escalation in support and scrutiny for NHS Grampian. As such, it will build on the previous support and improvement activity undertaken. The support provided to date has come from a range of providers, including the Government's Financial Delivery Unit and Healthcare Improvement Scotland. By way of an example, the Centre for Sustainable Delivery has provided bespoke clinical support to NHS Grampian and has identified opportunities that will support improvements. That includes a focus on reducing hospital occupancy to improve flow and reducing turnaround times for the ambulance service. There is also the potential to build on the current local model of flow navigation, and work is underway with the Board to develop that further. I should also reiterate that by accessing extra funding from an additional £30 million national investment in planned care, NHS Grampian was able to deliver more than 23,000 additional appointments and procedures last year. And we will continue to support NHS Grampian in building upon that work. Indeed, we are providing an additional £3.3 million to Grampian in 25-26 for 2 mobile MRI scanners and 1 mobile CT scanner. These resources are set to deliver more than 19,000 additional scans over the course of the year. Nonetheless, the financial and operational issues persist, and it is right that we now act further. We heard at the recent members' debate about the long-standing demographic demand and capacity pressures across the local health and social care system. We understand that these pressures will require a comprehensive local strategy to deliver the fundamental transformation required, and that this will not happen overnight. The key focus of this further escalation will be to help mitigate the immediate concerns about the financial and associated operational pressures and to stabilise the local system. Another concern that we heard during the members' debate in late April was about the leadership of the board, with the interim chief executive having announced his intention to retire earlier this year. I am advised that there is a strong shortlist of candidates for the chief executive post, with the final interviews scheduled for early June. As such, we are confident of making a successful appointment in the near future. As I have said, the purpose of this intervention is to help stabilise the system and provide a robust basis for the wider local transformation work required over the longer term in support of this new leadership. One of the key initial elements of this package of enhanced support and scrutiny will be a whole system diagnostic. KPMG have been appointed to carry out this work, and we expect them to report by the end of June. The overarching goal of this diagnostic is to better understand how the whole system is operating and, in partnership with NHS Grampian, determine what are the changes the board could realistically effect within its financial envelope. The diagnostic will establish a shared data-driven understanding of the current operation of the whole system and provide insight to the specific issues faced by NHS Grampian. It will review the existing service models and relationships with financial management, ensuring assets are being optimised and care is being delivered effectively in the right place. And it will identify what further cross-boundary collaboration could take place with other NHS boards, particularly within the north of Scotland, to support NHS Grampian to help in mitigating their operational risks. I am determined that the scope of the diagnostic and subsequent work will not be limited, and that it should extend to all relevant areas of local service delivery and expenditure. This whole system diagnostic will help to inform the board's detailed improvement plan and the tailored package of scrutiny and support package that will underpin it. As with other Stage 4 escalations in the past, the Government will also establish an assurance board that will report directly to the Director-General of Health and Social Care and the Chief Executive of NHS Scotland. This board, which will be chaired by a Scottish Government Director, will be tasked with providing oversight of NHS Grampian's progress against the specific actions in their improvement plan. I also want to recognise the concerns raised in the members' debate about local management meaningfully engaging with and properly listening to frontline staff, a point alighted upon in particular by Mr Stewart, both the debate and the topical question more recently. Meaningful partnership working with local staff and their representatives will be absolutely necessary for NHS Grampian to successfully develop and implement its improvement plan. We expect all boards, including NHS Grampian, to have robust systems and processes in place for engaging and involving colleagues in their planning and strategies, in line with our NHS Scotland national staff governance standards. NHS Grampian must work closely with their staff side trade union and professional organisation representatives in their area partnership forum, ensuring that they listen and respond to concerns raised by staff and that their views help to inform future activity. We similarly expect the full engagement of local clinical views, not least through the NHS Grampian Area Clinical Forum. The Government's Assurance Board will look for evidence of this meaningful partnership working around the development and implementation of NHS Grampian's improvement plan. Presiding Officer, I hope this statement assures members that we take these issues incredibly seriously and that we will continue to keep them updated on the next steps. This includes the specific actions required as part of the board's improvement plan and the shape of the ongoing support and scrutiny that will be provided by the Government. To reiterate, we remain committed to supporting the new leadership of NHS Grampian to turn this position around. We need to mitigate the immediate risks around the financial and associated operational pressures facing the board and to help to stabilise the system. This will provide a robust basis for the wider local transformation required over the longer term under the new board chief executive. But, Presiding Officer, foremost in our considerations of this matter must be the people served by NHS Grampian, and I know that we are all united in wanting the very best for them. Thank you.
Thank you. The Cabinet Secretary will now take questions on the issues raised in his statement. I intend to allow around 20 minutes, after which we'll need to move on to the next item of business. I'd appreciate it if members wishing to ask a question could press the request to speak buttons, and I call first Tess White.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I thank the Cabinet Secretary for advance sight of today's statement. Neil Gray visited Aberdeen Royal Infirmary in February this year. He promised he would do everything he could to improve the situation. But you only have to look at this week's ambulance waiting times to see that it's only getting worse. With lives at stake, it doesn't give a single person here any pleasure at all to point out the SNP has failed NHS Grampian and its patients. The reasons for such dire performance and stage 4 escalation, not the junior doctors, nurses, paramedics and porters. They're trying their absolute level best. No, NHS Grampian is in such trouble because it has been hollowed out by successive SNP governments. The Health Board has a history of chronic underfunding, persistent understaffing, the lowest bed base in Scotland per head of population, a national treatment centre on ice, massive cuts to health and social care partnership budgets for caring for the elderly and vulnerable, GP practices folding and MIUs on restricted hours. The Scottish Conservatives have repeatedly warned the SNP government about this perfect storm. So I'd like to ask the Cabinet Secretary, with underfunding of £250 million, how can NHS Grampian be expected to pay back a government loan? And what is the trigger point for escalation to stage 5?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I don't accept the characterisation that Tess White has set out. NHS Grampian are part of the same funding arrangements as the rest of other boards across Scotland and are within this similar level of parity to NRAC. I recognise that there are financial challenges there, which is why we have escalated them through this framework and why we are supporting them with the full system diagnostic provided by KPMG to look at options to provide better financial stability going forward. We have taken the step to escalate because of the concerns that she has raised around performance, around ambulance turnaround times, around unscheduled care pathways, because we weren't convinced that there was a sufficient plan in place that would see that situation improve, nor the financial position improve. And that's why, as I committed to in my visit in February, we are doing everything possible to support them, and that starts with this escalation.
Jackie Bailey.
Presiding Officer, NHS Grampian was escalated to stage 3 in January. 4 months later, it was escalated to stage 4. The government knew it was bad in January. They were told again in March when the Health Board submitted their financial plans. So why on earth did the government wait before acting and escalating this further? Why have they allowed 13,500 patients in Grampian to wait over a year for tests or treatment? Why have both the 31 and 62-day cancer treatment targets been missed? In the interests of patients and staff, the government really should have acted faster. There are 7 other health boards in the escalation framework because of poor performance. That's more than half of the health boards in Scotland, failing staff and failing patients. So will the Cabinet Secretary finally heed the warnings from Audit Scotland and cut the number of health boards to improve governance arrangements?
Cabinet Secretary.
No, I won't, because I don't think that taking that top-down structural approach at a time of needing to deliver for people is the action that is required. And we've set out the first stages of our plans on immediate delivery with the Operational Improvement Plan, and we are coming forward with further work around our vision for health and social care services in Scotland with a population health framework and a service renewal framework to come, which will look at the reform and renewal and the way in which we deliver our services in Scotland. But I'm committed to supporting the staff right now to deliver against the clear priorities that we've set around waiting times, around planned care, around access to unscheduled care pathways and general practice, to ensure that whether it's in NHS Grampian or any other part of the country, that we continue to see improvement for the people of Scotland.
Jackie Dunbar, to be followed by Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Reports earlier this year suggested that NHS Grampian face an additional cost to the tune of £20 million per year as a result of Labour's careless decision to increase employer national insurance contributions. Can the Cabinet Secretary please outline what assessment the Scottish Government has made of this issue in light of an already difficult fiscal environment for NHS Grampian?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you. I thank Jackie Dunbar for her question because she provides important context upon which the Government is wrestling from a financial perspective for health services across Scotland. We know that the increased employer national insurance contributions is a tax on public services here in Scotland. The money that was provided allowed us to provide 60% coverage to the directly employed staff, including at NHS Grampian, and the remainder is having to be provided through savings or other efficiencies being provided within services. I don't think that's an acceptable position for Labour to defend, because I don't want to see a continued tax on public services in Scotland, and it needs to be resolved at source at Westminster.
Thank you. Can I just encourage members to listen to both the questions and the responses with a degree more respect than we're seeing at the moment. Liam Kerr, to be followed by Audrey Nicholl.
Well, in fact, this disaster has really not come out of nowhere. Brokerage has been provided for the last 2 years, and we've seen various stages of escalation over the last number of months, and a critical incident as long ago as November. So why has it taken until now for the Cabinet Secretary to engage KPMG? At what cost are they being engaged? Will he commit to publishing that report on receipt? And what responsibility does he bear for failing to get a handle on this before now?
Cabinet Secretary.
We took steps to ensure that we were responding to the situation, first of all with the critical incident and providing support on their operational improvement plan, to ensure that they were able to respond to the critical incident and demonstrate that they had a plan that would ensure that that would not happen again. I don't believe that has materialised in a sufficient way that would give confidence around the unscheduled care pathways in Grampian. We escalated the financial position in January. We have not had confidence that that additional support and scrutiny has borne the fruit that it should do, and so that is why, short order, within months, we have escalated further to stage 4. The KPMG work is being conducted after a competitive tender. We received bids in very similar ballparks, so we're confident that we have had good value for money and that it is at a market value, and we will continue to work to ensure that the work that comes through from KPMG can deliver improvements for the people of NHS Grampian.
Audrey Nicholl, to be followed by Michael Mara.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Obviously, this is not the first time this year that NHS Grampian has been raised in this chamber, with members of all parties recently highlighting concerns over the specific issue of ambulance wait times in the Bord area. And I welcome the Cabinet Secretary's update on the work underway to reduce turnaround times for ambulances. However, can he further advise how the Scottish Government is supporting NHS Grampian's work to respond to the Centre for Sustainable Delivery's recommendations on the issue and work to help improve patient flow from the emergency department?
Cabinet Secretary.
Audrey Nicholl lights on a particular area that people served by NHS Grampian will wish to see demonstrable progress upon, and where we have tried to provide support through the Centre for Sustainable Delivery, and where, in the example that she gives around ambulance triage, we are seeing movement happening, and we need to see continued improvement. So an ambulance triage, reducing the risk to patients waiting in ambulance, allowing more effective prioritisation and, where appropriate, redirection to other care pathways. The use of rapid ambulatory assessment centre, now seeing 25 to 35 patients daily, with an increased footprint and extended operating hours, and increased respiratory and fertility capacity locally, with 2 extra wards having been opened as step-down areas for high-demand specialties. We need to build upon that progress through this escalation to ensure that the ambulance stacking we've seen, particularly at ARRI, the critical incident that we saw before Christmas, are not able to be happening again, but we are seeing improvements in those unscheduled care pathways.
Michael Mara, to be followed by Karen Adam.
Can the Cabinet Secretary guarantee that appointments and operations will not be cancelled to pay for the cost of what his statement identifies as resource and particularly management problems, rather than just issues of demand? And the Cabinet Secretary makes much of the crucial appointment of a new Chief Executive. I would point out to him the last Chief Executive lasted only 14 months before announcing his retirement. So what confidence should Parliament have that a new Chief Executive will be able to get a grip of that situation, where it appears to be rapidly deteriorating?
Cabinet Secretary.
There's two areas there. First of all, Adam Caldwell's, for whom I thank for his service, was an interim Chief Executive, so it was an interim appointment. There was always going to need to be a substantive appointment made, and I'm confident, as I said in my statement, that a substantive appointment can be made, and we will see the leadership that is required in order to turn around the situation in Grampian. On the first point around, I've already set out in response to the topical question that came the other week that I want to see financial decisions taken that do not impact upon frontline services and to make sure that we actually enhance the situation in terms of service delivery. That's something that I know Mr Mara and I would expect for the patients of NHS Grampian.
Karen Adam, to be followed by Lorna Slater.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Cabinet Secretary please provide an update on the activity delivered through the additional £30 million allocated in 24-25 to reduce waiting times in NHS Grampian, and what further work will be undertaken by the Scottish Government to ensure that these reductions continue?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. I thank Karen Adam for her question. By accessing extra funding from the additional £30 million national investment in planned care, last year NHS Grampian was able to deliver more than 23,000 additional appointments and procedures. As part of our £100 million investment to clear backlogs and substantially improve waiting times, NHS Grampian has been allocated almost £7 million funding to deliver additional appointments and procedures. This includes funding of almost £2.3 million for cancer services, £1.2 million for ear, nose and throat, £600,000 for orthopaedics and around £330,000 for ophthalmology. In addition, we have allocated £2.6 million for the National Treatment Centre Highland to deliver thousands of additional orthopaedic and ophthalmic operations for patients across the north of Scotland, including those from Grampian. As I've said, £3.3 million funding has also been provided for 2 mobile MRI and CT scanners in Grampian, ensuring patients will get the diagnostic tests they need to ensure that, alongside the further £2.5 million targeted at endoscopies, that will deliver an additional 5,000 additional scopes.
Lorna Slater, to be followed by Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Yesterday, Aberdeenshire's Integration Joint Board voted through significant cuts to disabled and other people's services. This comes on top of the UK Government's cruel cuts to social security for disabled people and today's worrying news about the state of NHS Grampian. What is the Scottish Government going to do to ensure that disabled people in particular are able to access the health and social care that they need in Aberdeenshire?
Cabinet Secretary.
Lorna Slater is highlighting an issue that is of great concern to me, and I heard from Conservative benches that it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. It has everything to do with what we're talking about. I'm extremely concerned about the capacity potentially being lost within community services in Aberdeenshire, and I'm committed to making sure that the Government is providing all resource possible through our local authority funding, as well as through the funding for health boards that should be arriving with our IJBs to provide the services that are required to ensure that we retain greater capacity and support within communities to stop people's ill health escalating to the point that they require the secondary care services or the unscheduled care demand that we are seeing in Grampian.
Alex Cole-Hamilton, to be followed by Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Many people will be understandably concerned by the content of the Cabinet Secretary's statement and the escalation at NHS Grampian, none more so than the pregnant mothers, the people who are undergoing cancer care and surgical patients from Shetland and Orkney, all of whom rely on services at NHS Grampian. Beatrice Wishart has already earlier this month asked the Cabinet Secretary about this, but can I ask him today to reassure residents of island communities who rely on NHS Grampian they will enjoy the same access to services and care that mainland patients will also?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Alec Cole-Hamilton for that question, and I recognise, in response to Beatrice Wishart, the the fact that NHS Grampian serves more than just the Grampian geographical area and serves on a service level agreement basis with other communities, including in Orkney and in Shetland. I've already set out some of the funding in response to Karen Adams' question that is arriving this year to allow for increased planned care activity, and that will be benefiting those from Orkney and from Shetland, as well as those domiciled within the NHS Grampian area. And I'm happy to further furnish with both Mr Cole-Hamilton, Beatrice Wishart and indeed, Presiding Officer, given your interests yourself, with that detail.
Thank you. Called Stuart McMillan, to be followed by Douglas Lumsden.
Can the Cabinet Secretary advise what the expectations are of the whole system diagnostic which will take place in NHS Grampian and how its results will be used to inform next steps?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. The work involves a team of independent healthcare consultants reviewing key areas of NHS Grampian's performance, including financial grip and control, alongside leadership and governance. KPMG, the contracted consultants, will work alongside NHS Grampian and report to government. This will help to inform agreement of the next steps and support required as part of the Stage 4 escalation, working closely with NHS Grampian. We're expecting the initial findings from that consultants' report to be available by the end of June.
Douglas Lumsden, to be followed by Rona Mackay.
Presiding Officer, it's clear that NHS Grampian is suffering from a serious leadership crisis, and I welcome that there is at last progress on recruiting a new Chief Executive. It's been far too long with no permanent Chief Executive in place, with waiting list spiralling and financial difficulties deepening. Cabinet Secretary, leadership comes from the top, and I appreciate you've met with me and my colleagues about the issues we've had. It is genuinely appreciated, but would the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that it's time for the Chair of NHS Grampian, who has presided over this mess, to be moved on immediately so a leader who better understands the scale of the challenge can be appointed?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think we will see new leadership coming into NHS Grampian in the form of a new Chief Executive. I want to work with the existing Chair to ensure that the issues that have arisen and the reasons for the escalation around leadership, as well as the financial control, can be addressed, and we'll keep working with the Chair to ensure that can be the case.
Rona Mackay, to be followed by Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Cabinet Secretary please outline how NHS Scotland's support and intervention framework works as part of an evidence-based approach to monitor performance and manage risk across the NHS in Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. Yes, I can. The support and escalation intervention framework is one of the key elements of our evidence-based approach to monitoring performance and managing risk across the NHS in Scotland. It's important to recognise that territorial health boards are separate legal entities, have their own governance and performance management responsibilities. The government's role is to maintain an overview and hold boards to account for the significant public investment made in them. We have to get the balance right in terms of the appropriate support and scrutiny provided, and the framework has 5 stages of that ladder of escalation, which provide a model for appropriate support and intervention by the government. Where it is required, as is in this case and other instances of formal escalation, a detailed improvement plan is produced by the relevant territorial board, and a tailored support package is also agreed to underpin that improvement plan, with progress against this overseen by government. The framework itself is overseen by the National Planning and Performance Oversight Group, which is a subgroup of the Government's Health and Social Care Management Board.
And Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Will the Minister answer the question he definitely failed to answer from Tess White? What specifically will the trigger point be to escalate this failing health board to Stage 5?
Cabinet Secretary.
That is a point that's kept under review, and the performance against the escalation and support that is provided under Stage 4 is clearly kept under review, and should we not see significant progress against it, then that remains an intervention of choice.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes the ministerial statement on NHS Grampian. There will be a brief pause before we move to the next item of business to allow the front benches to change.